For more on the U.S. mission against the Islamic State, military analyst and retired Army Major Mike Lyons joins us from New York. He's also a senior fellow with the Truman National Security Project. Mike, great to have you back on the broadcast. In fact, it wasn't that long ago you were on this broadcast and you said you'd like to see attacks into Syria. I'm not sure the administration watches this broadcast, but somebody's listening to you because it seems like there's been a shift where the administration is actually moving in that area. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, Mike, I think, well, first it's important to collect intelligence and information on that part of the world. It goes to show you we just don't really know what's going on there. And so initially they'll use these surveillance flights to just track movements, see if they can do some kind of predictability analysis on ISIS. Because if we go in order to attack large number of forces, you'd have to bring a lot of aircraft, and we won't have necessarily a lot of firepower with just a few drones. So it's going to be important to really understand what the targets are before we start shooting.
What's the strategy of the administration, though? At first, as Jim pointed out in his story, it was humanitarian. Let's help out the Yazidis. They're trapped on this mountaintop, and also protect our own people in the Kurdish area. Now it seems like there's this shift. Is the U.S. shifting its strategy? And if so, should the United States kind of define what it is?
Well, I think, Mike, there's two issues here. The first thing is the containment of ISIS in Iraq, and that's where the initial focus has been on the humanitarian mission, shoring up the Peshmerga forces there, getting the Iraqi security forces in the game, and looking to at least keep ISIS from taking more ground and then helping to roll them back. And then at the same time, doing these surveillance missions into Syria, knowing full well, as General Dempsey said, we're likely going to have to go and attack and kind of finish off the mission inside of Syria. So we're making sure we're keeping both the front door covered and the back door covered. They haven't communicated that, but that looks like how it's laying down.
The narrative in Syria has changed, though, and I want to talk to you about that. A year ago, it's Assad must go. Assad is a monster. I was reading a piece filed from Syria before coming here on the air, and here's a quote from one man who lives in one of the villages facing a tough choice. He said, IS is fighting fierce battles against this regime's forces to the east of Homs. Should IS attack our towns, I have no other choice but to fight alongside the National Defense Forces to defend myself, my family, and my home. And it seems like the choices seem so stark now.
Yeah, they sure are. And in some ways, the timing is going to have a lot to do with this. And if ISIS decides to turn inward towards Syria, attack Aleppo, capture that city, and then head towards Damascus and challenge Damascus, then what happens if they take over Syria? What happens if that situation arises? You'll have a humanitarian crisis tenfold as to what already exists there right now. And U.S. forces, Iraqi forces might, number one, never get there on time, or number two, not care. What happens if the rest of the region gets to that Iraqi-Syrian border and says, you know what, this is good enough, we're going to let Syria fall, we'll come back and deal with it later?
Let me ask you about Douglas McCain. The latest development, of course, a week ago, this British man with the execution. We've got two Westerners that have appeared in just a week's time. How much of a concern should this be for leaders in the West that these people might be over there and then come back to their home countries and create chaos?
Well, Mike, it definitely creates a new hazard for our homeland security, our FBI, ways to track these individuals that have used American passports, left our shores and gone over to there. The question is, when they come back to the United States, do they form other groups? Do they try to recruit people? Do they become the lone wolf terrorists, which I think is the greater threat? To replicate a 9/11 attack type again would take a lot of planning. To get that much in terms of casualties would have to be a very significant event that I think, given all of the resources we're devoting now to eavesdropping and communications, that we could prevent that. But what we can't prevent is that lone wolf terrorist, and the question is whether or not these people come back to the United States or Great Britain or to Europe and perform that kind of suicide bombing.
Mike Lyons joining us from New York. Thanks so much.